Recording progress.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection to Kata Judah. Kata Judah is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our sacred feminine site. What I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men so they can share their journey into the heart, to share their experiences, their highs, their lows. How did they start spiraling up? What tools, practices, wisdom, insights, knowledge can they now share with other men walking this path? And of course, us women who are walking right there beside them. Today's guest is a fellow Aussie, and his name is Nicholas Blewett. Now, Nicholas is an acupuncturist, and he's also a moxibustionist, which I'm going to find out all about that because never heard of it before. And he's also an internal martial artist, fourth instructor degree. So I'm going to find out all about that. And he also trains with qigong. So lots of new topics here that I'm really excited about delving into and finding out all about Nicholas's journey into the heart. Thank you. Enjoy. Hello, Nicholas Blewett. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Hello, Gemma Star. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. You're there on the Gold Coast, enjoying a beautiful summer day, I imagine, like us up here on the sunny coast.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous here at the moment.
Yeah, good one. So let's get straight into your journey and find out about you, Nicholas. To start off with, how would you describe the man you are today? What adjectives would you use?
What adjectives? Okay, I would describe myself as probably at a starting point. A bit of a beginner's mind that I try to bring into every day, but I would probably say courageous, just simply because some of the things that I tackle on a daily level to survive in the world that we live in at the moment. I would probably say fierce. I'd definitely say that would be an aspect of my personality. But also adjectives: happy, joyous, excited about life, and just, yeah, generally just a happy person.
I love that courageous came up first, because courageous is from the heart, because the root of heart is, well, I know Italian, it's cuore, and so I'm sure it's the same in Latin. But so it was beautiful that you started off with that, with courage and courageous. Nicholas, let's look at your childhood. What would you say was the defining period or issue that shaped you into becoming the man you are today?
Okay, so I have been extremely blessed with the family that I have in my life, but that's not to say that it wasn't wrought with its own challenges. So as I said, I've been really blessed, but as a child, I really struggled with a lot of aspects of judging myself against others, and being the black sheep of my family and outspoken, and for what I assume now as a mature adult, a very powerful child, constantly being suppressed, to be conformed, to be put into the box that society needed me to put in, and constantly being rejected, punished, and coerced, and into being what other people needed me to be. This was a really defining aspect of my childhood. So I struggled a lot with, I guess, judging myself against my brother, who is quite brilliant in his own way. And I punished myself for being stupid. basically, straight out there. I was never fantastic at school in the way that you need to be for school. And I think this is probably like a lot of men, I needed to be climbing trees. I really see that if I'd been given a mentor to teach me how to do specific things, how much I would have excelled. But as a child at school, I really struggled with reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of thing, and sitting down, putting my hands in my lap and just listening and not being active. I was extremely active. So I was really great in anything that required activity and community and communication, but put me down and asked me to copy something from the board, and you're going to see a very different side of me very quickly. I will try, but there are definitely a few defining moments of my childhood where when I was I've always had this saying, if you try and force me into a corner, I will explode out at you. And many teachers and adults who tried to push me into a corner or tried to suppress me found out just how unwilling I am to be defined or controlled, and found out about my explosive nature. And so I was punished a lot for the tantrums, as they were said, that I used to throw. But really now as an adult, I just see myself fighting back against being coerced into being put into a box, to being someone that society needed me to be for them. And so as an adult, really reflecting back on that has been quite powerful in helping me to accept myself as an adult and the power that I do have, and being able to reclaim that power and use it. And so that's, again, coming back to that courage. I have a huge heart and I tend to wear it on my sleeve. And so after always being suppressed as a kid for a lot of the passion that I showed for the things that I loved and for other people, and now being courageous is a matter of stepping up and using that and stepping out and fighting back against, I guess, the courage to fight back against my own mental talk. Yeah. To accept those parts of me and go, well, this is a part of me and I feel incomplete unless I communicate these things, unless I get them out there. And I still struggle with it, which is why I guess I say courage, because I still struggle to put stuff on social media and be seen for who I am. And there's so much negative self-talk that I'm dealing with less and less as I move forward. But it has been a major struggle for me to really step out and be seen for who I am in, I guess, all my glory.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. Sounds like you're talking about my journey as well. So as that little Nicholas, did you understand that the schooling system was inherently wrong and not facilitating your growth? Or did you just fight it, but not really have a reason for it?
No, well, interestingly, the other side of that is my father was a principal of a school in my area, and all our family friends were from that area, so teachers. But yeah, I inherently knew, I guess from a young age, that it was wrong. I actually hold a graduate certificate in education now. And when I was doing my assignments for that 10, 15 years ago, the guy in UQ, the teacher, the lecturer who was taking us for those subjects was actually like, wow, you're onto this. Like, you understand how education should be. So I think I really understood it, why it was wrong and why I really fought back. So I have a situation when I was in grade 6. I had a female teacher keep me in her class for the second year. And I couldn't handle it. I did not like this teacher at all. But she thought she was doing magnificent things to conform Nicholas into the way to be. And it ended up, I knocked her out by throwing something at her and hitting her in the head, because it came out years later that the male teacher who was in the grade 6 was actually having an affair with her. And so they bullied me one day horrifically. and they copped the explosive side of me coming out. But I can remember the things I was arguing back with them about the way they were treating me and how that was not the best use of their skill sets, even back then in grade 6. I probably used some extremely colorful language, but and I got really severely punished for what happened. I mean, probably rightly so. But when I look back and I see the bullying tactics and what they were using and how I was actually trying to, as an 11-year-old boy, fight back against that politic, it still is reasonably infuriating when I think back to that time, because I understood that I shouldn't have been in a situation like that in a schooling. There's much better ways to handle young men. And I look at a lot of young men now in schools, and, they're all being drugged, aren't they? They're all being massively controlled, and the systems of control that are on there. And I shudder. And I think there's a much better way, definitely, to deal with young men in schools.
And this is exactly what I want to ask you about. So let's say, someone has a son or a daughter at school, and they can see the little Nicholas that you were in their own child. Can you please speak to those parents and give some insight as to how you can assist them with the, for the highest outcome for their child?
If you can't homeschool, which a lot of people can't because society is set up in a specific way, if you can't homeschool, I would definitely say open up lines of communication to at least talk to your child about how they can deal with the system, how they can best use it to their advantage for their unique skill sets. Because there are going to be benefits. And so can you talk to your child about how to best use them, what to use and what to drop, or what to at least deal with, because you have to, because you're in that setting. So you can't work outside that system when you're in school, but what to take and what to leave. And I think just understanding your child and opening up those communications, because for me, my parents, my father was a principal, as I said. And so whilst I've had conversations with him about this as an adult and found out that my belief wasn't as accurate as I thought it was, I really thought that I had no support at home, and that because my father was a principal of a school in the area, that, I'd shamed him as well, and that, I was just that he never stuck up for me in those situations. And I'm not sure if that's like it for other children, because their parents aren't teachers, so maybe they stick up for them a little bit more, maybe. But I definitely felt like I just had no level of support in being mistreated and in the injustices that I felt had happened to me. And so I think just supporting your children and talking about education and what they're learning and how it may impact them further down the track, because I think that's really important. I mean, my son, I have a 21-year-old son, and when he was in year 10, he lived with his mother, and I had him on weekends. So I didn't have that much control. I didn't really know what was going on in his life behind the scenes, but he ended up dropping out in year 10. And for quite some time, I was, you've got to go to school, you've got to go to school, you've got to go to school. And then I stopped one day and went, hold on, I've been telling you this whole time that you're not going to get anything from school and you're going to learn it yourself. I'm really sorry. And I apologized to him, and I said, what do you want to do and where do we want to go from here? And so I think if you can talk about that with your children, about what they're interested in, engage them at home in projects that they are inspired, that they are passionate about, because that's probably the one thing that school doesn't do, is really show you how to apply what you are learning. And so, interestingly, my whole family's in teaching now. My sister's a principal, and my brother's in schools. I've been a lecturer at different things as well. So, but my brother became a teacher and was seeing boys not performing very well at school. And so he asked the faculty whether he could take the worst boys for their English classes because they weren't performing. And instead of forcing the romance novels down their throats that they were being asked to do book reports on and never handing in, he handed out car magazines and said, I want to see a report on Monday about your favorite car, your favorite motorbike, like something or other. And they all turned in their reports because he actually engaged them in something that they were passionate about. You know, you hand a 14, 15-year-old boy a romance novel and chances are he's going to use it to light a fire somewhere, you know, like, but you hand them something they're passionate about. And so I think as a parent, the best thing you can do is be engaged in what your children are passionate about and encouraging them and then showing them where they can use those skills.
Love it. Thank you, Nicholas. I'm also interested in when you spoke about when you were doing your training to be a teacher and they recognize, let's say, the system, the indoctrination of the system, recognize that you had a streak, a more open streak that was geared to maybe something that wasn't in their curriculum. And are you saying that they were welcoming to you maybe swaying a little bit from their curriculum indoctrination?
I think at least in an academic level. At least in an academic level. And I think I would have been talking about, you know, it was a long time ago, but I would have been talking much about what I'm saying now about how to redesign classes around engaging students in their strengths and in what they're good at. And so at the time I was actually lecturing at one of the natural medicine colleges here in Australia. And I actually got sacked for really bad performance. And when I was brought in front of the group of people who were challenging me, they said, you're not teaching your classes. I said, I don't have to. I'm that good a teacher. And they were like, what? Because I literally walked in on the first week and I worked out the kinesthetic, auditory, and visual learners. And I had the kinesthetics, because this is one class I was teaching was Chinese dietetics. So we're learning about food and the energetics and from a Chinese perspective about food and the healing properties. And so a part of this class, half of this class was actually preparing a meal and discussing about what was involved, or at least that's the way I ran it anyway. And so I had the kinesthetics going to buy the food, collecting money off everyone, and then they would go buy the food. I had the visual learners writing on the board and taking and writing down everything. And so I actually had the class organized that when I came in, I'd say, okay, we're learning about this, this, and this today. Go. And I had people going to the library to get books and doing research. I had some people collecting the money, going to buy the food, and then people writing board notes, people in their books checking what the person's writing and asking questions. And I literally just sat in the sideline and just directed the class. And the establishment were angry because I wasn't sitting up the front of the room with the book just reading. But everyone in the class was 100% engaged in their tasks. And by the time we finished, I'd sit down and I'd just have I'd just recap the class and what everyone had learned. We'd have a really nice discussion while everyone ate their food, and we'd be talking about the foods that were in there, and then we'd clean up and we'd go. And that's what I said to them. I don't have to teach. I'm that good a teacher. I have them doing it for me. I'm just simply there as a director to say, this is what we're learning this week. This is what we need to cover. Go for it. And I mean, they're mature adults for a start, but teaching should come down to just engaging people in their passions and helping them, assisting them to discover the creativity, the brilliance, their genius, their strengths, their skills, helping them to understand that when they come up with a problem, encourage them to find their own solutions. That's learning. And so, yeah, when I was crossing these ideas at a university level, they were well received. And I think to some degree, in some instances, they probably try these days to include some of those aspects, I would say, from what I've had discussions with teachers. But yeah, it's a long way off being able to allow kids to be completely creative in their own time and their own way.
Yeah. This is a fascinating subject. Is there anything else that needs to be said about this, Nicholas, as to speaking to parents, or to an insight into the children, or from a teacher's aspect? Because, I mean, does the whole system have to fall and be rebuilt for our kids to be acknowledged and facilitated to reach their highest potential of creativity?
I mean, I'd like to say yes, because I don't like Band-Aid models where you just, put a little Band-Aid here and a little Band-Aid there. So I think a new system would probably be really useful and constructive. But I think that could be formed from the grassroots up of education. However, because schools, I guess, are largely indoctrinated, having to control hundreds of students, it becomes really hard. And so, again, I think asking an institution to do that job for us probably isn't accurate. That's for parents. That's for the community. That's for society as a whole to look at. To blaming or assuming that an organization should be able to do what we should be doing as parents and adults for our children is probably the wrong way. We probably need to start working out ways to create that within our society at large and at home. And people don't have time. People want to come home. They want to put on Netflix. They're too busy. They're working 2 jobs, or they're stressed, or they're not performing at their own level of brilliance and genius, and so don't know how to engage children at that level. And so I think it comes down as a responsibility for parents, first and foremost, to be engaging their own children at that level. I think that's really super important. And I think from that parental pressure on schools, why aren't you engaging my child at a higher level? Look, this is what I'm doing at home, and this is how they're performing at home. And then they come here and you're treating them like inadequately for the level of where they're performing. You are not engaging them. Why aren't you engaging my student at a higher level? They're bored.
But is that the teacher's fault or the system's fault? Is the school system like the medical system, where you have to follow the curriculum and you can't stray from it? Doctors learn this disease gets this prescription and this drug, and I'm pretty sure that the education system, because funnily enough, my parents both teachers as well, retired now, so I know where you're at. And it's like, I feel it's the system. I feel there's a lot of teachers maybe like you that are put in a box and told exactly what they have to teach.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be really hard for some teachers like that who see that happening and can't move outside those boundaries. And again, that comes down to the system having to cater for so many different people. How do you create flexibility of approach into something like that? It's really difficult. I mean, I'm sure it can be done. Probably not a conversation for here and now, but the system probably does need a bit more modernization. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on, because I know I could talk a lot about that. Children education. That's sort of my thing as well. So anyway, let's move on to your rock bottom moment as an adult. What was happening there, Nicholas?
My rock bottom moment, had a couple. But the one so I did fought myself through 20s and 30s, up and down a little bit, and had that defining moment when I was 40, of everything that just fell apart, everything dropped away. And I really think what happened was universe, spirit, God, infinite intelligence, whatever it is, I had conformed, not necessarily to society, but to a level within myself of where I was performing. And I was in a relationship, so it was a relationship breakdown due to multiple different factors. But I think I'd become, even though I was trying to reach from a level of complacency, I guess, perhaps, or at least within a very stuck mindset. And so at that time, life needed me to do more. It needed me to be bigger. It needed me to be engaging myself at the level of my passions. And from the situation I was in within that relationship, that was not going to happen. From a masculinity perspective, I was blue-pilled. I was doing everything I can to please someone who was underconfident in themselves, quite vacuous, never happy, never pleased, never able to engage me on a way that lifted me up. And I was doing everything I could to appease this individual. And life turned around and said, no, you've got to go find yourself. So what that led to was me coming back to what's called largely monk mode. And so quite interestingly, when I was 12, 13, I was already reading different stuff about Christianity and Buddhism and Taoism and all sorts of different stuff. And at 13, I used to jokingly say, oh, no, I want to be a monk. I should be a monk. And so I went into what's called monk mode in some circles, and I spent 3 years alone. At that stage in my relationship, I guess looking back, I'd identify as a love sex addict. I'd had multiple dysfunctional relationships in my youth due to different things. And so I came out of this relationship and went, no more. I am simply not going around on this merry-go-round again, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And so it was a real, I guess, Phoenix situation. I was broken beyond compare, but very determined to not allow that to ever hurt myself or anyone else ever again. And so I spent 3 years pretty much alone. And when I say that, it's hard to imagine that in our society, but I lost my complete network. I lost my friends. I lost my partner I was with and her daughter. And I ended up really with only my father and my son. And my son's too young to be of, any real support anyway. So I ended up kind of with my father, who was my lifeline. And I slowly over 3 years dug myself out from where I had become. And really found myself. Carl Jung has a process called individualisation, and Friedrich Nietzsche talks a lot about individualisation. And individualisation should be our natural maturation, our natural progress of maturity as we grow up. However, due to our hang-ups and stuff that happen in our lives, a lot of us don't actually end up becoming individualised. Now, individualisation, we think of ourselves individual, but a lot of us have super herd mentality. And so individualisation, like I think back to a tribal scenario, and if you have herd mentality in a tribe, you need that, you're counting on that one person who goes, no, that's a stupid idea. Let's not do that. Or, hey, I've got this amazing idea. We should do this as a tribe. You need people to be so individualized that they can speak up without feeling smothered by a certain indoctrinated belief system. You actually need people at that level. And so I guess this goes right back into our education. How do we teach children? How do we teach ourselves as individuals to actually become individualized and have the freedom and the skill sets to be able to completely stand within our own frame, within our own God-given brilliance, to assert ourselves naturally and perfectly and beautifully and articulately, without that fear of being judged or ridiculed or suppressed or outcast or any other things that can happen. And so I was reading and listening to a lot of podcasts about individualization and about how to really become that. And this is something that's always been a really strong point of me. I'm quite outspoken. I am quite myself, but I'd fallen into that thing where I was really just trying to people please, nice guy syndrome, people please, and just really didn't want to stick my head up too much. And so part of that individualization process is that courage, again, to do that really hard yards. And I had, I was weeping myself to sleep night after night. I was going months without any human physical contact, in a sense, so wretched and hurt that it would repulse people. And so it really took me a level to go to the depths of my soul and completely rebuild myself in the way that I chose to rebuild myself. And so it was a real blessing to have everyone removed from my life. It was a real blessing to have that space. And even though it hurt, that's not even I can't even think of a word that would describe that pain that I went through. But one of the things I'm really passionate about now that I'm looking at this year is kind of starting up a monk mode program, because I believe there's probably a lot of men out there who are in that situation. I've been through that situation at multiple times in my life where the physical contact from another human, I can remember times through this when people would come up to touch me and I'd actually shut up and move away just because I was just not used to any physical contact. I'd be okay if I was prepared for it, but sometimes it really freaked me out. So there was a whole level of being okay by myself. And I think that's what monks do when they go into a cave and they meditate for years. They go into that level of isolation so they become themselves. And Indigenous Australians did it when they went walkabout. Amazonian shaman did it when they went into the jungle. They go on an individualization process. And so I think largely what this is about is becoming nature, becoming your nature. Yeah, when there's no one else to bounce, when ideas off, when there's no one else to take on their belief systems and you are only left with who you are. It is a process of shedding the skin of the person you've become, peeling back the layers of that onion until you are left with your core. And it's really painful. It is exceptionally painful. And so I don't think there's enough understanding of this. In our society, we have this idea that community is everything. That's great. And community is really good and it's really important. But it's really only useful when you are completely individualized. If you're not at that stage, you are going to take on others' beliefs. You are going to take on and become part of the herd. And even in the woke culture, in the alternative culture, there is massive herd mentality within that culture because it's just an indoctrinated viewpoint. So I actually, and I was at a workshop a little while ago and I expressed this view to someone else who'd been somewhere similar, and a group of people there were like, no, in a relationship, it's going to be mirrored, you're going to get the most mirroring ever and you're going to be confronted with the most stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, but how long have you ever spent alone? Are you comfortable yet in your aloneness? And so and as we know on a kind of a thing that to go into a relationship, you need to be full in yourself. And so that's part of that, is actually getting to that depths of knowing exactly who you, if you keep going to relationship after relationship and you actually are just getting the mirrored representation of someone, you're taking on beliefs, you're taking on indoctrinated opinions, and a lot of people really need to spend that time alone to heal from all those injuries so they actually know 100% without a doubt who they are, and they shouldn't even be getting into a relationship before that time. And I mean, there are certain sects of monks who do get married, but they do so later in life once they are individualized and they know who they are, so they can actually not take on the stuff from the other person, so that, you know, they actually can perform that task within a relationship of not taking on the pain, not taking on the hurt, and be comfortable in their own skin. But, you know, with Tinder and all these dating apps now, it's just a continual winding door of people getting into relationships and having, like when I first became single again, it was like staring out across an ocean of trauma. And I wasn't free of that. Like, I saw my own within that, you know, it's not like I was judging here. It's like, wow, as adults, like, you know, and so it's been really interesting to step back from that and just take all that time for myself to completely come back to myself. But I think because in our society that relationships are held as like this all-encompassing success, that people just trying to keep going back there. And I find that can be really destructive.
Oh, this is great, Nicholas, and I totally agree with everything you're saying there. It was interesting, isn't it? Because until someone is what you refer to as individualized, they are going to take all that shaping and molding from education and university and further education and the media and the entertainment industry to shape who they are. So I totally very important. Now, the two words that come to mind as you're saying that are authenticity and freedom. Do you feel now that you've freed yourself? Is that a masculine aspect of freedom, to find this individual self and be okay with it?
Yeah, I still don't think I'm 100% there. I still have a giggle at but I can see it now. And so I can have a giggle sometimes and I'm like, hey, I really just did. But it's great because I can pull myself up on things now that I would have probably habitually done.
Yeah, awareness.
So, and I think it's masculine, but it's for both genders. But yes, I definitely think as men, we're probably need this process more, but only because men have a little bit more of that, what's the right word? We need to be able to stand really strong in ourselves. And so, yeah, that's a super important quality, and not to get upset when things don't go our way because we know who we are. So like to not be affected by other things that maybe we don't agree with because we know who we are. And so it's okay if other people have different views. It's okay if other people don't agree with us. We don't get bitched by it. We don't get emasculated by it. We don't need to challenge them. We're like, oh, okay. So you think that about me? Cool. And go off. And that's an extremely masculine quality. Like getting upset that someone might say something to you in a certain way, that's your problem. And I mean, like they talk about, I don't like the word alpha, you know, alphas and stuff like that, but truly masculine men aren't going to be affected by other people's views or opinions. They just do what they do because they know themselves. And that's that old axiom, isn't it? Know thyself, like really know thyself. So you are not affected, but you can let a myriad of different opinions and beliefs occur, but you know who you are. And so you're not going to get upset at that.
So good. What tools and practices did you use in these 3 years to get yourself to spiral up? I mean, from the sound of it. I mean, yeah, what were you doing in these 3 years to find yourself?
The first year I drooled and stared at a wall and cried a lot. The second year I started listening to podcasts, started listening to podcasts with positive ideas and positive concepts. And I actually found a lot more of that in the entrepreneurial sector. One, it's not gendered. So it's not like saying men should be this or men. That's not individualizing. That's an indoctrination. Who are you? And so I find in the entrepreneurial sector, it's a very growth mindset. It's about personal development. And so I listen to a lot of podcasts in entrepreneurialism because of the positive messages, and just put that into a personal growth aspect, not even business. And if they were talking about business, I would just rule that back into what does that mean for a person as an individual to become a better human being, to get more of what they want in life. I listen to a lot of motivation and a lot of positive YouTube. And I say this to a lot of people these days. I'm like, if you can't trust the voices in your head and what they're saying, plug into someone else's positivity. And there's tons of YouTube videos. Just write, positive motivation and plug it in and listen to David Goggins. Just fucking go out there and just fucking do it and just put it in your head. If you can't trust your voices, put someone else's in there. And I really found I was just plugged in 24/7, because voices in my head were self-destructive. They were negative. I was blaming and shaming myself, hourly, minutely, and so putting something else in there to really start just having positive information put in, and then having the openness to try new ways of being. Yeah, allowing myself the space to be like, I'm going to try different things. I'm going to be very flexible with my approach, and I'm not going to trust my judgments and opinions on things because they've been built up from a different person that I was previously. So if I need to create a new person, I need to be open to new experiences, new ways of doing things, without the judgments, to find out what this new person I'm becoming actually likes and enjoys. I journaled lots, just of a night, and I tried not to get too bogged down into emotions. For men, I know there's a big thing, men should talk and men should be, emotional now, and I don't necessarily always agree. I think we should be really practical. We should be really rational. We should just, I'm going to try this. What's the effect? Was it good or bad? Yes, it was good. I'll do more. It wasn't so positive. Why? Was there a better way I could have done it? And be quite analytical and quite rational and logical about things. I was going to men's groups for a while, and I know all men's groups are different, but I found sitting around in a group, the culture in this particular group I went to was just sitting there seeing who could dredge out the worst tragedy week after week. And I didn't gel with that. So I left that, and I basically just tried not to delve into my emotions, because at that stage of being that broken, I couldn't trust them anyway. They were all the old Nicholas Blewett. They were all the trauma. They were all the built up junk. So I didn't want to trust my emotions. I needed to build a whole new emotional platform for myself. And so when I was journaling, how now do I need to think? And that's, I guess, where that entrepreneurial information comes. How do I need to think for a growth mindset? As opposed to sitting there going, I feel this and I feel it, and just rewiring that into ourselves. I don't think for anyone, but particularly men, that is very helpful. I think we're better off if we go very stoically, yep, I may feel this way today, but irrespective of that, this is the way I'm going to choose to behave. And then just doing that until that wires into your neurology, and then you can behave the new way consciously and choose that for yourself. Because if we keep rehashing those emotions, and I mean, it's a great control technique for men in our society, shame and blame. Shame and blame men into thinking they're the worst freaking possible thing on the planet, that they are scum, and keep them there. And we've got to liberate ourselves from that. I've done unspeakable things. We all have. But you just need to do better next time, right? And so don't indulge in them. Don't indulge in the shame and blame. Own it. Really just own it. Come into your own. You know, I am capable of all sorts of things. And the one thing I like about owning that is that they are tools. And in some situations, those tools may even be appropriate. They would need to be very dysfunctional situations. And I guess I'm getting into a topic I call the inner animal, which is maybe where we'll go in a little bit, where with my martial arts training and my qigong training, understanding that animal. And so, you know, I mentioned earlier, you know, I threw something in my teacher and heard it. Like, I'm a rambunctious. I have a lot of passion and a lot of, I can be quite fierce at times when I need to be. And so rechanneling that, I think, is what I'm talking about here. And allowing not to be blamed and shamed for the way that those things have shown up in the past, but learning how to channel them into how I want them to show up now. And understanding that that was an immature version of myself who had never had any mature adult teach me how to harness them. Whenever they showed up, it was never, wow, you're a really passionate kid. Let's see how we can work this into the rest of your life. It was just, well, you're a little shit, aren't you? You know, you need to be blamed and shamed in front of everyone for how you've behaved. Not, wow, you were such a passionate kid. I can totally see that in the way you responded. Let's find a really positive outlet for this. That's not done. And so blame and shame is a massive mechanism in there for men. And so that's what I found in a lot of men's circles, is that blame and shame indoctrination. Let's all sit around, talk about the worst things we've ever possibly done. Whereas I think in like the entrepreneurial sector and really good positive motivation, it helps us to future pace those elements of ourselves and not get caught up and bound in that element. And so I see this a lot in speaking with men who have come out of relationships with women who largely try and control men with how horrible the man's been. And men can really quickly fall into feeling really bad about themselves. One of the most interesting things in hindsight with my previous relationship, which that was done to me, I was deeply shamed and blamed and personally embarrassed about different things that had happened. But through the healing process, I actually realized how much I set off her things and she set off mine. And it was just so reciprocal. But just how much that wasn't talked about in a lot of elements. She was, you were really, really bad, but what she did was totally justified. But no one ever really saw the way she went about things, how much set me off, and how the things I did actually set her up to do the things to me, and how symbiotic those elements were. And so I think as men, we need to release ourselves from that. And I think the best way of doing that is for ourselves.
Okay, so this is great because guilt and shame, the two lowest emotions, two emotions with the lowest frequency on the Hawkins scale, guilt and shame, and that's why religion functions so well to keep men there as well, and women, of course. Okay, so what can you say? Give some practical tools, and then we're going to get into your martial arts, but some practical steps for a man who is watching that is overwhelmed with this guilt and shame. Some practical tools and steps that he can start spiraling up.
Okay. 1, accept where you're at. Deep acceptance of where you're at. matched with the desire to change that, and a knowing and an understanding that you can, and that what has gone before can be changed, and that certainty about yourself in relation to those things needs to be extinguished. You're a clean slate every day, and you're only becoming that when you choose to become that, consciously or unconsciously. And I think first and foremost, accepting where you're at is super important. I think it's when we can't accept that we go further into that blame and shame, and that can be a really negative spiral down. So once we've accepted that about ourselves, again, as I said, allowing ourselves to be flexible, allowing ourselves to be creative, to find new ways, accept that the previous ways of doing things haven't worked, and that there has to be better ways of doing it. Excuse me. And that doesn't mean that super esoteric, mystical things are the answer, because, there's so much of that toxic positivity out there as well. And you need to be a lotus blossom floating around the breeze like some magical, mystical unicorn to be of any, positivity. Not that, really understand that if you can get to your core, you'll find out the way that you can be authentic to the world, and that you show up, and that will be absolutely perfect for you. And that's not going to be the way that anyone else does it, and that you have the freedom, after accepting where you're at, to choose and to experiment and to try and to be playful with the new person you're becoming. And then things like plugging into podcasts, plugging into motivation stuff, journaling, spending lots of time alone and learning to be okay with that. That's a really huge one. And a lot of men out there, excuse me, I think men in general some men spend a lot of time alone. And so there's probably a lot out there who are like, I'm always alone. I get that. And I do too. Like, I recently went to a festival, my first festival ever. And I just spent the lead up to Christmas alone. I spent Christmas alone. And then, I ended up going to this festival, and I was saying to the person I was with, I'm like, I'm not used to this many people around me. It actually freaked me out to begin with. It really took me a day or two of just kind of like, okay, there's like 3,000 people here. Okay, I can deal with that. But in the same token, one of the things that I think is super powerful in me is now I can be alone for extended periods and be okay with that, because I found out through that process that I like everything that I like. Everything that I like doing, I actually like doing. And so being my own best friend, actually getting really engaged in the things that I just like to do, and not needing anyone else's agreement, justification, or anything. I just spend time alone now, and I'm creative, and I engage in the things that I want to be better at and that I don't understand and that I want to improve. And it gives me the freedom sometimes when I make mistakes to really have a good laugh and then sit down and work out why or how I could do things better. So I think being alone and really getting comfortable with yourself is absolute key. So, if you're out there and you're jumping from relationship to relationship or person to person, and you see the same things happening in your life, or you're spending a lot of time alone, it's not there. Like, one, if you're already spending a lot of time alone, get really comfortable with it. And don't blame and shame yourself for not having anyone there. It's a gift. Because as soon as there's other people in your life, you don't get that time for yourself anymore. There's heaps of parents out there who are like, I just need some time for myself. And if you're jumping in and out of relationships consistently, pull right back. Find that aspect of yourself that you like. Grow to like yourself as a person. Coming from that perspective. And so, as I said, journaling, get engaged with things that you like. Just do things that you like. When you're bored and when you're like at wit's end, or you're crying, or you're just hurt, or you're angry, and you're aggressive, why is this the way? Go and do something you love. Go Go tinker on your car, take your boat out, go fishing. For me, I go out and do martial arts and I train, or I play guitar, or I write, or I work on my business, do things that I get positive feedback from myself for doing, and journal about those things. Keep a log on your own personal improvement of the things that you like. Find that element of mastery within everything that you do every day that you love. And I think that's really important, because that builds self-confidence. That builds self-worth. Like, I've always had a thing, which is short of having my limbs removed, no one can ever take my martial arts and my tai chi and my qigong away from me. And even then, I can still do it in my mind, right? I can still meditate, I can still do things, and they are something that it's mine. And so it builds my self-worth when I engage in those activities and I improve. Whereas if we're left always trying to please other people, or doing everything for other people, or always with other people, we never really can accrue those self-worth points. If I know who I am, I know what I'm good at, I know what I love. And I think that's just so super important. And men, generally speaking, we do get caught up in doing everything for everyone quite a lot. And I know that's not seen, but, I don't think many men really choose to probably go and labor the way they do. They do it so they can pay for their way. They can do it so they can pay for their family, so they can, and men constantly give and give and give and give. And it's a very thankless job, very thankless job. And so I think taking that back to what do I enjoy for me, and not having guilt, shame, or blame for actually going and doing those things, and spending time with yourself and praising yourself. So you are your own best friend. That was freaking awesome, dude. Thank you. Actually spending that level of time with yourself to build your self-worth, things that people can't take away from you.
Yes.
So that when people try and take something from you, you've got something to fall back on. But if you don't have anything to fall back on, you're going to build up all levels of resentment for your family, for your lover, for society, for this, for that. And then you're just going to have negativity. This, you're going to really live at effect. This is why I'm this way, or that's why I'm this way. But if you can come back to the things that you love and that fill your cup, that no one can take away from you, then irrespective of what people try and strip back from you, you'll know who you are.
Definitely. How old were you when you got into martial arts, Nicholas?
19.
Okay. What's the importance of martial arts in a man's journey to discovering himself, or what would you say the importance of it is in a man's life?
Learning about our power. Learning about our power. And there's so many different elements to that. So I was a volatile. When pushed into a corner, as I said earlier, I could be quite volatile. So I got involved in what people would know as Tai Chi. Most people only think of Tai Chi as the slow stuff, but traditionally in China, Tai Chi is, striking and elbowing, and it's actually designed to, like, Krav Maga level of take someone down hard and fast so they can't hurt you. This was practiced by Chinese villagers. So when, people came in to rape and pillage the village, they could protect themselves. So the slow aspect of Tai Chi is just the meditative aspect. So if you actually look up what Tai Chi is, Taiji is in a Chinese dictionary, it actually says shadow boxing. So like a boxer might stand in the ring and fight an imaginary person, that's actually what you're doing in the Tai Chi form. And a lot of people don't practice the other side of the art, which is, sparring, two-man fighting sets, striking drills, kicking drills, just like any other martial art. But it's not well known for it. So when you say it, people are kind of like, you do Tai Chi, right? That's not a fighting art. However, it is. And so that's how I began to learn it. So I got kind of that yin and yang. I got the slow meditative and the martial. And so when I started, I had no control or understanding about the implications of the physical, emotional, and energetic power that I had. And it taught me about those. And it took years of development, I guess, but most martial artists will learn, like most of the people, you're not worried about being attacked by someone who's a professional fighter on the street or someone who's really high. That doesn't happen. The people you're scared of in the street are those who have no appreciation for how much they can hurt someone or how much they can be hurt by someone. So I think through doing martial arts, one of the key things you learn, first of all, is I could get really hurt here, or I could really hurt someone. And I don't want that either. And so I think that pulls back your level of desire to get into conflict, physical conflict to begin with. One, you don't want to end up in jail. You don't want to hurt someone. You don't want to be hurt because you understand how easily an accident can happen in any sort of situation, any sort of physical altercation. So I guess in that sense, it teaches you to really harness that aspect of yourself. It's there. You can use it. It's there when you need it. But how do I use that to fuel other aspects of my drive, to make me courageous, to make me powerful, to make me stand up and say the things that need to be said without feeling I'm going to be judged or ostracized by my peers? Like, it gives a level of personal strength to stand up for who you are, to protect, that I that lives inside this fleshy meat suit that we've got. Who is that person? And it gives them, an ability to cultivate and use that aspect of them. And that's not within all martial arts, of course, either, I think. But, I mean, intuitively, you may learn that. But definitely within the way that I've gone about it with Taiji, and I think the essence of martial arts is about that personal development. Yeah.
How did you learn to manage that explosive part of little Nicholas? And when did that happen? Did that happen through martial arts, or had you already learned some strategies before 19?
Yeah, I was encouraged a lot to talk, I guess, when I was younger, like, to talk about it. But that's not always possible when you are a young man. We've got a lot of energy to burn. There's a lot going there. And so that can quite easily spill out. Like when words fail and if people aren't listening, that can be really difficult to contain. And so I guess over the years, just seeing the negative effects, the negative consequences of those actions and making different decisions, learning to harness that, to learn to kind of stand in my frame. And, that has spilled out at times through my adult life. When pushed to a point where language breaks down, communication breaks down. Now I have a zero drama policy. I do not do drama. I do not even get into those situations anymore. I'm just quite happy to let people do whatever or believe or think whatever they want to. And that was a gift from that dark night of the soul kind of situation that I had. Was I simply don't do that anymore. And that's been amazing. And so I think underneath, to have that level of self-awareness and self-confidence is first and foremost. And I think martial arts can give that to us. But also the awareness around that, as I said, that how much we can be hurt or hurt. And then seeing that play out in situations and learning from them. I don't think there's some magical pill. I think it takes time and experience and the willingness to accept being wrong and the willingness to accept our humanity, to understand that we don't always act like perfect little angels, and to have the freedom around our person, our character, to accept that, maybe we've done some stuff that's not so positive, but that's okay. and then just the willing to change that, or at least to change our life situation where we're moved further away from events where that can happen, or where we let people into our lives who have that level of drama, or they don't have the level of sophistication and they want to keep trying to pull you back into that. Just having that frame, having that masculine, I don't do that anymore. You're gone. Like I met a woman a year or so ago, and it's funny. So since that real dark night of the soul and that relationship breakdown, I've actually kind of been like, since I was dating again, going, oh, you remind me of that person. Goodbye. Oh, you remind me of that person. Goodbye. Oh, don't remember. I remember that characteristic. I don't do that anymore. And that's been amazing to have that ability. But then when they try, you know, crabs in a barrel, when they try and pull you back down into it, actually just having that strength of, no, I don't do that, because I'm aiming for that now.
I love this. I love this.
Yeah. I'm aiming for that. I'm becoming someone completely new. And the person that I'm becoming, we don't do that anymore. That's not a level of communication. That's not a level of behavior that I accept from people anymore, because I don't accept the behaviors of me that would come out in those circumstances. And so simply by putting those boundaries up and maintaining them, again, this level of self-worth and self-confidence that comes from sitting back and just going, actually, I am so much better without that person or that behavior or that situation showing up. And to have the self-confidence and the self-worth of going, you know what? You fully sidestepped that. And you know what? I'm alone again. And awesome. What do I love doing again? I love doing X, Y, Z, and getting involved. And the amount of downtime I spend in regret or in depression or being hung up is so minimal now. And I can literally be like, yep, done, next, and move on. And because I just want to keep climbing to be a better, stronger, more sophisticated, more intelligent, more positive, more helpful person to those people who are ready to accept that part of me. And I think when we focus on that, and that is our guiding light, our whole life will transform around us.
Definitely. I love this no drama policy. And I'm very similar. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people in victim mode, definitely no drama, gossip, all that stuff. And when you eliminate them from your life, it really does free, this space up to be filled with positive aspects. What was I going to ask you now? Okay, well, while I think of that, let's move on to qigong. Is that how you pronounce it? I think there's a couple of different pronunciations.
There are. Qigong is generally the way. Qigong.
Okay.
You listen to someone who's in America, they'll go qigong.
Okay.
They don't pronounce it right.
Right. So what's the Aussie pronounce?
Qigong. Qigong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please speak of this and how people can facilitate it into their lives and what they might expect and what benefits it has.
Okay. All right. Now we're at something I think I know something about. Okay. So qi is largely thought of as energy. But in the Chinese medical classics, our physical meat suit is qi. So qi is energy, but physical, biological matter together. As far as we're talking about our body, there is an energy in the body. It's called consciousness. The Chinese call that Shen. So the qi of qigong is the physical aspect of our body, our biology, which is energy and matter fused together. Gung actually means work, but it's a very special type of work. Gung actually means working for merit or working for virtue. And so qigong literally translates as embedding or transcribing or infusing merit or virtue into our qi. So using our qi, using our physical body to manifest virtue. So one of the most interesting things that I've been researching and learning and discovering and finding out within myself is that in Chinese medicine, we have 3 different types of fundamental energies. We have Jing. Now, Jing is kind of thought of as our genetic energy, like genetic energy or DNA in a sense. It's the blueprint that is us, that we are given from our parents. From that Jing, Shen, which is spirit or consciousness, comes down. So the DNA and the spirit merge to create qi, create the human body. Now, the idea of qigong is that we use our Jing to create more qi, and then we use our qi, our physical body, to create more Shen, more intelligence, more spiritual, more refined sophistication. And then with that refined sophistication and intelligence and spirituality, we actually create more qi, and then we create more Jing. And this kind of begins to become a cycle. And in a sense, it's an evolutionary cycle of how we build better DNA to build better bodies, to become more sophisticated, and then how we use that sophistication to build stronger bodies and to build better DNA or to build better genetic situations. And talk about that all day. However, a good way to think of that Shen or that spirit is actually virtue. And so in a Chinese perspective, virtue is an energy substrate. It's an energy, it's a longevity substrate. It's an energy that we use in our body. And so creating virtue within ourselves is actually a way of building our energy and creating that correct pathway forward and letting it kind of lead us. And this is why old spiritual texts and the Bible and aspects like this talk about virtue, whereas these days, virtue's been watered down to how much money do you have in account? How much is your business earning? Do you have a Lambo? What's your house look like? Do you have a pool? And then everyone's online clapping each other. Oh, you're amazing. You know, you've earned 6 figures. And that person who earned the 6 figures or whatever, they may have virtue. Maybe they have, and that's what's allowed them to create that. Or maybe they've just using skill sets. But virtue should actually be something that is a tangible element within our bodies, and it can be built. And if we focus on this, so in Chinese medicine, the virtue that we've got 5 elements. We've got fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And these relate to the internal organs. So each of these elements has internal organs and meridians and all this kind of stuff. And each of the elements has an emotion. And in Chinese medicine, a lot of the time we talk about the negative aspects of those emotions. So because we're talking about treating someone for disease. So we're worried about their grief, or we're worried about their overthinking, or we're worried about, you know, their anger. But those emotions, those negative emotions, have positive virtues. And so when we actually think to ourselves, well, I don't want to be angry. Oh, okay, so I don't want to be angry. You can actually learn to build that virtue by focusing on the positive aspects and what that virtue means for you. And so interestingly, have you heard about warrior, magician, lover?
Yeah, the archetypes.
Yeah, the archetypes.
Yeah.
So they actually fit perfectly into the 5 elements. Okay. And so the liver energy, the wood element, the liver energy relates to the warrior archetype. But when we look at the warrior archetype in a positive light, he's about benevolence. The only reason he fights is for the betterment of community and society, and to tear down old doctrines and old information and tyranny to replace it with things that are positive. And so it's actually the opposite of anger. And so we can start to look at these virtues and actually transcribe them or infuse them into our body through using qigong. So this is one of the things I like the most about practicing Tai Chi is whilst, yeah, it's a martial art, we're learning to, you know, strike people and hit. we're actually learning about those elements of virtue and how to access them and write them into our neurology. And it's a really important aspect. And so a lot of the Chinese martial arts were a character refinement. Yes, they were about fighting, but they were actually more about how to stop people wanting to fight by refining their character to a point where they had virtue. And that's why you hear the Chinese stories about the master who doesn't fight, who gets down and bows to the person who wants to fight him. Because what's the point? He's got rid of his ego. He just wants to go on his way and do the things he's good at in life. He doesn't have that, someone can't insult him any longer because he knows who he is. And so learning to work with virtue in our lives, and I'm starting to see this creep into a lot of masculinity channels, talking about virtue.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, but I feel it's important to get Nicholas Blewett's definition of virtue, seeing we're talking about it so much.
Okay, so we know what values are. Like, you have your own certain set of values. Virtues are different because virtues are values that are held by society as a whole. Things that are seen to be good by everyone.
Examples?
So someone might have a value of, I value money. Right. But someone else might not. Yeah. Okay? But everyone can pretty much agree that the virtue of compassion is a pretty socially acceptable, it's an aspiration for most people to have compassion, or to have benevolence, or to have zeal. And zeal is passion. Zeal is the energy of grass growing through concrete, that ability for life just to continue to be crushed into the ground and come back again, to have that passion for life. And so these are all things that are, held by society as being positive traits, whereas values can be individualized. Virtues are things that are held by by society as a large. Yeah. And so there's quite a bit of a kind of a baseline understanding that we need to come back to virtues. Just look at government. Corporations, they don't run by virtue at all. They're actually there for their own intent. They don't have any desire to create a system which is beneficial for life, for growth, for development, for a future-paced understanding of where we're going as a humanity. It's just
service to self, right? Instead of service to others, which service to others always includes service to self. I love this, and we've got about 15 minutes left. And I did let you know at the end I would open this up to everything else that needs to be spoken about. So let's include it all in this conversation, and I'm happy for you to lead it. But I'd really like to incorporate where these virtues sit with healthy masculinity. Can you run us through the virtues of healthy masculinity, please?
Okay, so in qigong, I'm going to come at this from a side perspective, perhaps. There's a word used a lot in masculinity circles called frame. And frame is someone's ability to withstand external pressure. Okay. And so if your wife comes home, or anyone, mum, brother, sister, whoever, comes home and goes, oh, you haven't taken the rubbish out, and you go, what the you've just totally lost frame, right? Whatever they said has crushed you and you've reacted. Okay. So virtue actually builds our frame. So the Bible, whilst indoctrinated religions, Catholicism and Christianity, has given the Bible a really bad name, and I'm no Bible basher by any stretch of the imagination, but what I've come to realize is that aspects of the Bible are a manual on masculinity, aka how not to be a bastard, right? And so the virtues that are held in those traditional cultures were so that men could behave in a way that allowed their yang energy, their creative yang energy, to be used constructively, to create more for everyone. Like the phallus, the penis was always seen as a symbol of fertility for the land. And when a man holds his virtue strong and is competent, everything flourishes. Everything can flourish naturally. But when he's not doing that, he sets fire to his own house in a sense. Things begin to crumble because people don't feel safe in his presence. He's not able to express the elements of his being in a really constructive way that allow for that growth. And so I think for men, looking at really key virtues, and it's interesting because within those 5 elements that I mentioned from Chinese medicine, there is kind of different terms for each one. So it's not just like, you can't just say one word, because there are character development of individual aspects. But what we'd be looking at is for the fire element, which will relate to the king. The fire element is about drawing clear purpose down from heaven, the Chinese would say, or getting our clear purpose from who we are. And so that is about order, and a compassionate order. Okay. So that doesn't mean that sometimes you won't necessarily be fierce. I mean, people think compassion is always being nice. But Buddha, there was a woman who came to Buddha with a dead baby and said, Buddha, can you bring my baby back to life? And Buddha was like, yeah, I can. If you go and find me 5 mustard seeds from any house in the city that hasn't experienced a death. So this woman ran off through the city to find 5 mustard seeds from a family that hadn't experienced death, and eventually realized that everyone had experienced death, couldn't be fixed, buried her baby, and came back and was Buddha's disciple. And in today's standards, people are like, that is horrible. But in ultimate compassion, he brought about a changed state in her. So it's not about being super nice. It's about being compassionate and having order. So that's that king energy, or royal energy, because non-gendered. Then we have the metal element, which is the magician. So that has that element of sacred knowledge, but it's righteousness. It's understanding what's right and wrong from within you, and holding strong and steadfast to that understanding of what is right and wrong, and not crumbling. So, you're incorruptible as far as your values and your virtue is concerned. You are more interested in what is right, what is holy, what is forward growth, what is constructive. The water element, which is the kidneys, would relate to wisdom and willpower. So willpower is the ability to persevere through things, to keep going, to be crushed and to rise again. As I said, it's grass growing through concrete. It's that passion of life and that zeal. And in the 5 elements, that zeal, that passion actually fuels your purpose. So we've got heaven coming down, and we've got that water energy coming up to temper it. The wisdom comes in from persevering through things over a long period of time. You become wise through that. Then we've got the wood element, which would relate to the warrior. As I said, it's about benevolence, but it's also about taking action and being decisive. This needs to happen. Let's get it done for the betterment of everyone. And then we have a 5th element, which is not held within the archetypes. But as far as the Chinese medicine is concerned, and the way they would say this is, that's man. And man is in the middle of this thing. And so man's ability is to have integrity with everything that he does and everything that he chooses. And so using those elements as needed for the betterment of himself, for his tribe, and for everyone within his presence and within his realm of influence. And so whilst there's a lot more that go into these virtues, I've started to at times go, okay, what virtue do I need to access to get this done? So sometimes I need that perseverance. And then I understand that from that, certain level of wisdom is going to grow in me because I'm going to push through a situation which is difficult, and I'm going to access that as an element of my being and grow it. Sometimes I fall into perfectionism and I don't take action. So I need to access that warrior to be decisive, to make a decision and just do it. Sometimes I need to tap into what is my purpose again when I'm feeling empty. And so that's a virtue of knowing what my purpose is. So I wake up, and if I'm feeling a bit drained and a bit weak, like, right, what is my purpose? And using that as an energy, as a substrate, as a characteristic to fuel me through the day, as opposed to falling into the negative aspects of these emotions. And so we can learn to flip that story within ourselves and to understand and start working with those positive traits within our character and within our personality to actually start creating a stronger frame, that center point from which we can act, from which we won't crumble, from which we won't break down and act otherwise in ways that may negatively affect us. And I think over a period of time, through applying those character building traits and tapping into and getting to know what our warrior aspect, what that decisiveness and action look like for us. It's going to be different for every man. Okay? And learning how to access that and what that means to us, it allows us to grow. And definitely from a Chinese perspective, that's what they would say, is that this is an evolutionary process. And as we build that spirit, as we build that virtue, it transcribes into our physical being. Our neurological system grows into that person. That actually transcribes into how our DNA will show up for the next generation. So this is about evolution as a humanity, about how we use those virtues. And so whilst that can be done in anything, the temple arts, from what I've learned from qigong and tai chi and within martial arts, and through entrepreneurialism and personal development, that's really what I'm focusing on now in my life, is how do I refine, sharpen, develop, and really grow those virtues within myself. And as a direct representation, the outside of my life is changing. And after 4 years, I still don't have a family, or like, I've got my family, but I live still quite a very isolated life, but I'm filling it up with me. I am the thing that I am focused on in my life, and it has given me the ability to reach out and help people without needing any return from them. But at the same time, I keep my center now. I don't over help people and then find out I've got nothing left. I don't put myself out anymore, because then I can't give to anyone if that's the case. And so I think that's what this idea of frame and true masculinity is about, is having that level of self-control and awareness to cultivate our yang energy, our doing energy, so strong that we can use that to grow everything. I mean, and one of the things I talk a lot about in workshops with men is how strong men are as healers. Men are super powerful healers because we have that amount of yang energy, but we really need to contain that and learn how to shine that light, to shine that heat, that warmth, and allow it to radiate out to people without losing that from ourselves, without burning people.
So good. Thank you, Nicholas. Now, where was it? I wanted to make sure if we could just dedicate a couple of minutes each to giving people a broad outline of what acupuncture is and moxibustion, because I did look it up and I'm like, wow, what is this new word? So please, we are at the 90-minute mark. I'm happy to go a little bit over, but if we could just contain a couple of minutes to each of those subjects, please.
Okay, so you know when you cut yourself, Gemma, and you don't have to sit there and think about it to heal it. Your body just does it for itself, right? So you would agree that your body has a natural healing mechanism.
Right.
Okay. So whether it's acupuncture or moxibustion, I'll define more about them in just a moment, but whether it's acupuncture or moxibustion, what we're doing is giving a stimulation to activate the natural healing intelligence. So if I put a hypodermic, a doctor's needle, an injection is super big and fat. You have to pass liquid in and out of the injection. So that cuts the tissue. It's actually designed with a beveled cutting edge. So that's why after you get a blood test or something, you have to hold it to stop the bleeding. Acupuncture needles are designed like a rocket. And a rocket would split the atmosphere as it goes through, correct? So an acupuncture needle has the same kind of conical head shape, and it splits and weaves itself through the muscle or through the skin and through the muscle tissues as it goes. So when you pull it out, nothing's cut. There's no injury to the body. But the body doesn't see it that way. The body's natural healing intelligence goes, hey, some bastard just stuck a piece of wire in us. We should march down there and see what's going on. So the immune system marches down to that area and goes, oh, look, there's a tear in the muscle. There's inflammation. There's something going on here. We should work on that while we're here. And so it's kind of up-regulating that body's natural healing intelligence to understand what's going wrong. Okay. However, let's say that I'm using a point on the hand, but it's for a problem in the head. So I put the needle in the hand. The natural healing intelligence goes to that part of the hand and goes, well, there's nothing really happening here. We should run a systems check because the body has the body has referred pain. So the immune system gets to that point, but goes, no, it's not here. Let's run a systems check. Oh, the problem was actually there. It must have been a referred pain. Let's go there and work on that. And so having acupuncture is like saying to the body, hey, remember you've got a problem here? Come back and work on it. Hey, remember you've got a problem here? Come back and work on it. Because our body's got everything it needs to heal unless that organ, gland, or structure has degraded to a point where it can no longer function or do its job. But if it can do its job, then we're basically just reminding the body to do its natural job. So we'll understand what needles are. So moxibustion is a herb. It's a leaf of a plant that is rolled into different shapes and burnt either on top of a needle, so the heat travels down through the needle into the body, or burnt directly on the skin and given anywhere between 0.1 to 2 of a degree of a burn. So you may get a tiny little blister, right through to just feeling warmth. So anywhere from feeling warmth down to just a tiny smidge of a burn. And again, the body goes, hey, someone just tried to burn me. Let's go down and take a look. So yeah, both of them are ways of just kind of influencing the body to naturally heal itself.
Oh, you've got such a beautiful way of expressing things. I can imagine, I can see now why you were such a good teacher, apart from, the other philosophy. Let's wrap this up now, Nicholas. Where can people find you? And I'll ask then for you to deliver a final message to men, no more than a few minutes, please.
Okay, so probably one of the best places to reach me is just on Facebook, just Nicholas Blewett. I think there's a picture of me. I think I'm pretty much wearing this shirt. I've got my guitar.
I'll put the link here. Yeah.
Yeah, the big cheeky smile. That's probably the best place to get in contact with me. not on much social media, so Facebook's probably the best place to contact me. I run a few different groups on there as well. I run a group, Inner Animal, which is for my Inner Animal men's group, where we use martial arts and qigong training. I know we didn't even talk about it. Martial arts.
Back on a man speak for the Inner Animal. Yes.
Yes. And the female animal's coming as well, so the group for that. And then I run another qigong group, which is basic for my online qigong programs and my qigong teacher training programs and different aspects like that I run. So Facebook would be the best place to get in contact with me. Definitely. My website, though, if you wanted to jump onto my website, it's qifit, so qifit.com.au. So qifit.com.au. My acupuncture's on there. And again, my qigong teacher training programs and different events that I run on there. You can find me there as well.
Awesome. We'll put all those links below in the description.
Thank you.
Hey, this Inner Animal, I know, I think that's what I wanted to ask before. Can we wrap it up into a couple of minutes, and then maybe, we can, as I said, get you back for a whole episode of Man Speak on the Inner Animal.
Yeah. It's a big topic. I actually wanted to speak about it before. Yeah, the Inner Animal, one of the things, just really quickly, that I've been amazed at, I was actually trying to create the Inner Animal when my life collapsed. Right. It was as if the universe went, "Oh, you think you know something about men's work, do you?" And it didn't throw me a curveball. It actually came at me with the bat. And so it's taken me like 3 or 4 years to kind of find out how I want to run that and how I want to work that since that. But one of the things that's been amazing is the way that men have found that qigong, and because it's not really a martial arts class, we do just use aspects of physically hitting and conditioning and hitting with no words and doing different things like this. And it's about how we build and cultivate energy and deal with stress and how we build frame, essentially. That all the men have just been blown away, and the changes that have spilled over into their lives without talking, without needing all these other elements, just actually being physical and applying that to our body and installing that qigong, that virtue into our qi. The feedback I've had from the group of guys I've been running with has been, it's quite surprised me. It's quite astounding. Yeah. I'd love to talk about that more. However, what was the question you had for me? Sorry.
Well, if you've said enough on that for now, as I said, I will invite Nicholas back for a 90-minute episode on the Inner Animal. A final few-minute message to men. What have you got to say to those men who are struggling, who, are looking for a bit of light in their life that we haven't already spoken about?
Don't be afraid to look at the way that your life isn't working out. Don't be afraid to come back to where you're at and not always have to springboard off where you are, but to retract and to accept that maybe things haven't gone the way that you wanted them to. And to really dive deep into yourself about why that's happening, and to be fluid, to be plastic enough to change and create a new you. You are not defined by your past. You're defined by the actions that you take now. And some of the stories through mythology come from men who have done less than admirable things in their lives, and who have made a decision from those things to change. I think that is the most powerful place a man can come from. The most powerful men on the planet are the ones who have fucked up and decide that they are no longer going to accept that from themselves. They're no longer going to accept the messages from the world that they're being told about themselves, and redesign themselves from the ground up. Use all that anger, all the sadness, all the fear, all the grief, as fuel, because they are aspects of those virtues. And learn to swap that around, change your narrative, plug into things, and just accept that you're not where you are, but that you can change. And it's always available to you, even when things look the worst. It has taken me 4 years, and that's why I said right at the start, I think I'm at the beginning. And it's taken me 4 years to get to the beginning, and I'm always going to be beginning. Because there's always more growth, but we just need to be able to deeply accept those aspects of ourselves we don't like and choose to determine our future in the way that we desire it to be.
So good. Thank you, Nicholas. What an amazing show. And I know we could have spoken so much more in detail about many of these subjects. So I want to thank you from my heart to yours. An incredible journey, and yeah, I can just see, you have so much to give back to men and life now. So very admirable and virtuous.
Thank you so much, Gemma. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, likewise. Thanks everyone for watching. If you could please like, share, get this message out, and I look forward to seeing you in another few days with another episode of Heart Warriors. I'll just keep you on if I may, please, Nicholas. Pause.